Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to Bayliss Public Library. I think you know me. I'm Ken Miller, the library director, and I have a few thank yous to do. I'd like to say something about upcoming events, and then introduce Julie tonight. Thanks, Ron Reikki, for putting this together and for including us in the show, so to speak. Julie Barbour, thank you. Thanks all our panelists. We appreciate it very much. Friends of the library for the refreshments. I sampled them last night and they're dynamite. So if you have a chance, you should get one before I get over there. The library's program committee, Susan James, who's on the camera, is the chair, and several other members that are here. Yes.
Nancy.
Nancy. And I think that's about it that's here tonight. Safe Harbor Books of Cedarville, they're selling books out there, and we've decided that everyone has to buy 8 books before they can leave because we want to be sure to support them. The Michigan Humanities Council and our other sponsors for helping us out with this event tonight. And I'd like to recognize Pam Christensen, who's here, Director of Peter White Public Library in Marquette, who's been working with the UP Book Tour. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you.
Upcoming events on July 5th at 7 o'clock, William A. Decker, MD, will be here to speak about his new book, Upper Peninsula Hospital, A History of the Newberry State Hospital. This event's co-hosted with the Chippewa County Historical Society. The display out front in the case is about that hospital. So if you have a chance to look at that, then come back for the program. Julie Barbour is host of tonight's event. She teaches at Lake Superior State University and co-edits their journal Border Crossing. Her chapbook, Come to Me and Drink, has just come out. Julie's going to introduce our authors, so please welcome Julie Barbour.
We've kind of got a small crowd, but we still have a microphone in case any of our panelists or authors need it. We're going to do something a little bit different, not just a reading tonight, but also a discussion from your writers so you can get to know them a little bit better and get to know how they fit into Michigan as writers. So yeah, after I introduce each one of them, I'll talk a little bit about what they're going to be telling you. We'll have about we'll go till about 8:15, and then we'll have a Q&A, and then by 8:30 you'll be able to talk with them a little bit more individually and buy their books if you're interested, which you should be. But let me go ahead and introduce everyone, and I don't think everybody's in order, but I'll make sure you know who everybody is. Jennifer's to my left. Jennifer Bird's poetry has been published in numerous journals, most recently in Modern Haiku and Beloit, I can't ever say it right, Beloit Poetry Journal. Her full-length book of poems, Body and Echo, was published by Plainview Press in 2010. She's also the author of a book of creative nonfiction, Daily Bread, a portrait of homeless men and women of Lenawee County, Michigan, based on her experiences reporting on local homelessness for the Adrian, Michigan Daily Telegram newspaper. Burd received her BA in English and her MFA in creative writing from the University of Washington. She currently works as an editor and writer for High Scope Educational Research Foundation in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Next, I got Dave Warner. Okay, call you Dave Warner?
Sure, that's fine.
Well, having written just 2 novels, Dave Warner is no stranger to the world of fiction. He spent 40+ years writing advertising copy. Deadlock is a mystery thriller set in Sault Ste. Marie in 1943, the story of a young woman who travels to the Sioux to work on her uncle's newspaper. Investigating the murder of a close friend, she runs headlong into a Nazi plot to take out the Locks and change the course of World War II. His latest, Freeze Frame 2016, is set in Detroit and Gaylord. Just days from the 2016 presidential election, ad executives Darcy James and Sean Higgins discover a terrorist plot to corrupt the election using subliminal advertising. Warner resides in Clarkston with his wife Marlene, and he's a graduate of Michigan State, where he majored in advertising. He decided on advertising as a career, he says, because I was too nervous to steal. Up next is Sue Harrison. Some of you might already know her. She was raised in Pickford, where she still lives with her husband Neil. If you don't know where Pickford is, it's not far from us, about what, 20-30 minutes. Harrison graduated summa cum laude from Lake State, so she's one of ours. Definitely one of ours. And prior to the publication of her novel, she was employed by Lake State as a writer and acting director of the Public Relations Department and as an adjunct director of creative writing. Her first novel, Mother Earth, Father Sky, was a national and international bestseller and was named by the American Library Association as one of 1991's best books for young adults. Her other novels include My Sister the Moon, Brother Wind, Song of the River, Cry of the Wind, Call Down the Stars, and SISU?
Yes.
Okay.
Sissy.
Do you actually say it out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any Finnish people here tell me how to say it?
Her novels have been honored as main and featured selections of a literary guild and Doubleday book clubs. And also on location in Japan, she worked with Japanese public television in the production of a documentary about preserving the environment of Tokyo Bay. So she's got a lot of talents. Her novels have been published in more than 20 countries and in 13 languages. And we've got Ron Reikki with us here tonight, who really, we wouldn't be here without him. He wrote the novel UP, which is published by Ghost Road Press, nominated by Great Michigan Read Series and Saline Writer Series. Steve Wigg, Two Eyes Productions, is working to turn UP into a film. He's also the author of the poetry chapbooks Leave Me Alone, I'm Bleeding, and poems about love, death, and heavy metal, both published by Gypsy Daughter Press. And I think you have a new one out too, don't you? You've got 3 chapbooks out, don't you?
And there's a new one, She Took God, just came out.
Good, good. All Saints Day opened Ruckus Theater's 2010-2011 theater season in Chicago, and Carol was selected for Best 10-Minute Plays 2012. So he's a man of many talents. Lake Superior Theater is set to produce Reikki's adaptation of Dandelion Cottage this summer. His writing has appeared in Oklahoma Review, New Ohio Review, Christian Science Monitor, Pank, Clockhouse Review, Verse Wisconsin, the Toronto Quarterly, and other publications. He holds an MFA in theater from Brandeis, an MFA in creative writing from Virginia, and a PhD in literature and creative writing from Western Michigan. And he's also a member of the Screen Actors Guild and the Dramatists Guild. And we've got Keith Taylor down here at the end. Poet and writer Keith Taylor coordinates the undergraduate program in creative writing at the University of Michigan and directs the Bear River Writers Conference and is the poetry editor for Michigan Quarterly Review. He's published 13 volumes, collections of poetry and short fiction, edited volumes, and translations. His work has appeared in Story, the Los Angeles Times, Alternative Press, the Southern Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, Notre Dame Review, the Iowa Review, Witness, Chicago Tribune, and Hanging Loose. His most recent books are Marginalia for Natural History, which you haven't read, you need to get your hands on, published by Black Lawrence Press, and Ghost Writers, a collection of ghost stories co-edited with Laura Kashicki, published by Wayne State University Press. Okay, so you know a little bit about them. If you want to know more about them, if you go to the UP Book Tour website, you can click on their names and they should have links to their website so you can learn more about what they've been doing, because this is just a little bit of what these writers have been doing over the years. So now what I'm going to do is we're just going to go down the line, and for about 10 to 15 minutes I'm going to have, these writers have already chosen what they're going to read, but here's what I'm going to have them do tonight. They're going to pick a poem, if they're poets, or an excerpt from a novel that reflects Michigan in some way, either through an issue, a place, or a group of people. And it can also, you know, if they want to talk about this, they can also talk about how it was inspired by Michigan, because a lot of our writing, as we write in Michigan, isn't always connected to Michigan, but can be inspired by things that are going on. And they're going to read and briefly discuss the reasons why they wrote the piece, so you get to know a little bit about the inspiration behind it, and why they think this is important for audiences in and outside of Michigan. So why should people read this? Why do they think it's important? What are they doing here? And then after we finish this, we'll head right into a Q&A. So, you know, if you have questions while they're talking, you know, write them down. I'll be jotting down some things too. But also, you know, as you guys are talking about your work, you can also respond to each other. Feel free to respond to each other. If there's something that someone else has said that you want to speak to, feel free. All right, Jennifer.
Okay. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
And Julie has said I can read a poem from each of my books, so I'm going to do that. And I'll start with a poem from Body and Echo, a book of poetry published in 2010. And the poem I've chosen is inspired by Michigan seasons, and not the one we're in this case. So I'll first read it and then say some things. This is called In Winter. Just when I only want it to be over with, I am edged into being by what the tree knows about spring, but won't say. Night's deepest thoughts as day. For one who loves morning, there's a place to live in those clear recesses of South, where at sunrise all afternoon, until a sky with no need to cling to anything hangs a star, and the moon reads the meaning out loud, falling through the branches. Just when I wonder why, I must belong to a land under hard freeze. The mourning dove's silence above the snow calls trees out of the blue, so I can see the pure shape of the world. Each day born, unadorned, stripping me bare, promising everything. And with this piece, I like all the seasons here. I was born in California, but my first memories are from Michigan and the different places I lived growing up. I lived in a few different places, and I just always remembered what the seasons were like, the flavor of Michigan, the plants and the animals, and there was something in me that always missed that or longed for that. And so when I moved back 12 and a half years ago, I had visited, I had family roots here, my grandparents lived here, but it was kind of a reunion with some of those early sensations and memories, those things that kind of become, they get in your body, I guess, when your first memories. And something about winter, it's not like, I do think, I'm not looking forward to the cold, but when it gets here, I always seem to enjoy winter. And I, like a lot of people around end of February, start thinking, when is it going to be over? But, and up here, I haven't experienced the UP winter, so people are probably laughing, but there's something about the spareness and the bareness and the clear, crisp outlines, and something that seems so mysterious about these things, about winter and nature, and that kind of makes me go further into myself to feel a sense of being and to discover things and to just feel, find a home inside myself and enjoying these beauties. So I think that for me, a connection to nature and place has always been important, and I think it's good for all people to explore, I guess, and something that no matter how much you move or how rooted you are, that it's always there for you. So that was where that came from, and I find
very nice thoughts. Very nice thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I find place and the natural world, things that are important to me that way, do come into my pieces wherever I am, and travel inspires me a lot. So if I go somewhere, the nature inspires me as well there. But the other piece I wanted to read is from my book of creative prose, Daily Bread: A Portrait of Homeless Men and Women of Lenawee County, Michigan, which was published in 2009. And this, it gets its title from the Daily Bread of Lenawee Soup Kitchen in Adrian, Michigan, which is about 40 miles south of Ann Arbor. And this book came about after I did a series of newspaper reports for the Adrian Daily Telegram newspaper several years ago when I was a reporter there. And I did an assignment, they gave me a long-term assignment on local homelessness. And it was very, very rich for me in many ways. But one of the things that happened was, as I was going around interviewing some very impoverished and homeless people, and agency people too, for these reports, I was hanging out at the soup kitchen a lot. I was often noticing details and things people said or wore or did that for newspaper reportage were probably kind of unimportant or even tangential in a way. I mean, and those kind of things that made it in were buried under so much other information that I just really longed to be able to frame those details in the way poetry frames vivid particulars with metaphor and white space and interesting sounds. But these didn't come down as line breaks. They came down as prose pieces, short prose pieces that I think of as portraits of moments spent with these people. So I wanted to read one piece in particular about a homeless veteran named Alan, and he had been homeless for a few years when I met him, and is not any longer homeless as far as I know, but was living in a tent in the woods year-round at that point. It's called At Alan's Tent. It's November, and Alan says he still hasn't had to use his kerosene heater to warm his tent. I'm used to the cold. I'm military. He's originally from Florida, but did 3 years jail time in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. After he got out, he was taken to a probation facility in Adrian. He said he didn't get very far when he was let go with no money, job, or car. Now, he says, the cooler months will bring in cash from raking leaves and shoveling snow, but he needs to find some warm socks and gloves. I'm military. You travel on your feet. You got to have dry socks and dry boots. He says if there were a shelter, he'd go there for the winter, but he'd still want to keep his spot here in the woods by the river. And now I can read your mind. Why would a person want to live like this? I'm a, how do you say it, a recluse. I'm a hermit. It's only temporary. I've been here 4 years. But you ought to see this place in the springtime. It's too green. I can't even find myself. It's a tropical paradise. When I sit here on a nice morning and see the deer and the birds flying across, it's my house. When things are green, I've seen the mist on the river. So I chose that for tonight because I was also impressed by Alan's being able to find a sense of place through the landscape. Even though he wasn't originally from Michigan, he wasn't necessarily here by choice, and he lived a fairly harsh existence considering he had to live in a tent all through the winter, and still he found comfort and solace in nature and spoke poetically about it. And also because I discovered in getting to know the homeless community in Adrian just how many talents people had, and that confronted my own stereotypes about how people behave and how, you know, what they may have to offer the world. I was pretty ignorant going into the assignment, so I really loved discovering all their talents and unique personalities and capacities. And so, but this was about another connection to nature in Michigan.
I think you've shown the pride that he has in himself, even though that's what he has, but he has pride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's military.
Yes, he's military.
But you also found a lot of this under a lot of other stories, right? Like that you had said that you kind of had to dig in to really find the stories, or it was already an assignment for you?
It was an assignment for me to cover homelessness, but it was pretty big, big, vast assignment. I had 4 months to do the reporting, and so I just really enjoyed, I guess, or the details. They're just easy for me to see, and when people spoke in an interesting way like that, I picked up on it. But it felt like this isn't going to be in the newspaper report necessarily. But to me, some of these things were so telling about their situation that I thought I need to do something to try to present it in the way that it struck me, if I could. And newspaper format wasn't the best way for all of it to come out, I felt. So I felt like doing this project.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
My wife is arriving at exactly the right time. You missed Jennifer. She was very good. I wrote Deadlock, and it takes place in the Sioux during World War II. That's a great story that a lot of people don't know. I heard when I was a younger man about the fact that there was 7,300 troops stationed here, and probably everybody in this room knows about that, but there's a lot of people that don't, and especially the folks who live, as I do, beneath the bridge. And it's a great story, one that I think all people in Michigan, and certainly people in Sault Ste. Marie, can take pride in. So this is kind of a what if, you know. It took me a long time after I heard the initial story to sit down and actually write something about it. But it talks about, it starts with Detroit with a young woman who's almost knocked off by a mob hitman because they're after her. She writes for the Detroit Times, And she's written a series of articles exposing the mob as the perpetrators behind a series of gasoline rationing coupons. And you know that everything was rationed during World War II, and so the gasoline is gold. So she escapes the hit and goes up here, comes up here, and goes to work for her uncle's newspaper, the Sault Morning News. And investigating the murder of a close friend, she runs into this, as Julie was saying, into this plot to knock out the locks. So I thought, you know, what it does to Michigan, I think, is it shows people what really went on, and I think it's, you know, can instill some pride in people as to the important part that the locks played. 90% of the iron ore that was bound for our defense plants had to go through the locks. So if they'd have been knocked out, it could have changed drastically, would have changed the course of the war. We could have lost the war. So what I'd like to do is just read the prologue that sets it up, and then just something to give you an idea of Kate Brennan, who's our antagonist, or protagonist rather, and what she is starting out to see. On October 4th, 1942, almost 3 years into what had now become known as World War II, the top-secret British MI6 branch at Bletchley Park decrypted a German Enigma radio transmission that referenced an attack on the locks at Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, USA. The transmission indicated the assault would take place the following year during dedication ceremonies for the new MacArthur lock. The attack was scheduled to wreak maximum damage on both property and the lives of the thousands of people who were expected to be present during the ceremony. 90% of the iron ore that had supplied the Allied war effort passed through these locks by lake freighter, and destroying them would shut down every airplane, tank, ship, and munitions plant in the United States. The message was taken very seriously. Now, Kate then drives into Sault Ste. Marie, and for reasons that I'll explain later, I write as Kate Brennan in the first person. So she's telling the story. Hours after driving off the ferry, I crested a hill on Highway 2 and started down into the St. Mary's River Basin in Sault Ste. Marie. Founded by French missionaries in 1668, the Sault is Michigan's oldest city and the country's third oldest town west of the Appalachian Mountains. The sun had poked out again, and the scene below reminded me of Detroit's annual J.L. Hudson Thanksgiving Day Parade. There were a myriad of giant gray balloons floating 1,000 feet or so above the town. The closer I got, the larger the balloons became. Like those in the Detroit department store's holiday parade, they were some 30 feet long, but instead of bright fairy tale figures, they appeared drab in color and oval in form, like dirigibles. We drove into town, car windows down, Nick, her dog, with his head stuck out in the wind, taking in the sights. On a day when the stifling heat forces you to drive with the windows down, it's hard to imagine these streets bordered on either side by snowdrifts 10 feet tall. But UP weathers Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Each November, Mr. Hyde comes riding in over Whitefish Bay on dark black-bottomed clouds that drop flakes of snow the size of quarters. Quarters pile up on streets and sidewalks and make travel by foot or automobile not only difficult but treacherous. But today it was difficult to fathom anyone making a living hauling snow. I drove down Ashman Street and through Sault Ste. Marie, barely noticing the shops, restaurants, and taverns. My focus remained on the balloons ahead. I had to lean forward and look straight up to see them at the very top of my windshield. Now there's a pause, and we go to the third person. As her car slid down through town, Kate Brennan couldn't have noticed Klaus Kruger as she passed where he stood on the sidewalk outside Collins' department store. He too found the giant balloons interesting, but for a far different reason. Born in Germany, Klaus Kruger had admired the United States even as a young boy. Shortly after he began to talk in his native tongue, his father had coached him in speaking Americanized English. The family planned to move to America, and his father wanted him to be fit in immediately. But his father's death, when Klaus was 12, changed those plans. That was 1924. And like many Germans, young Klaus was drawn to the charismatic personality of a man known as Adolf Hitler. Hitler had been sentenced to 5 years in the Landsberg prison earlier in the year, but was pardoned and released after serving 9 months. Klaus could still feel the excitement of rallies that marked the beginning of the Nazification of Germany. The patriotic songs continued to echo in his mind And when the United States declared war on his native land on December 8, 1941, he vowed to do whatever was asked of him to serve the Third Reich. He joined the German army where his intellect and aptitude for weapons and hand-to-hand combat impressed his superiors. They were even more impressed by his command of American English. As a result, he drew what many of his countrymen considered to be one of the most important assignments of the war. He was in Sault Ste. Marie to see America's precious sulaks destroyed and its military manufacturing brought to a dead halt. So we meet Kate and we meet Klaus. And later on, she gets involved in the mystery. So anyway, that's and as I say, I wrote it because I thought it was a great story, and I thought for Michigan, I think it shows people how important Michigan was, and the sulaks, especially in this town during World War II.
Set that up.
That's your turn.
Well, it's my turn. I don't know whether to use the mic or not. Can you hear me, Ken?
Yep.
As I said.
What?
Can you hear me? Other people can.
You're fine.
I'm fine. I won't use the mic then. All right. You know how you hear of these authors and they died in 1985 and they're still publishing books. And you're saying, oh yeah, sure, somebody's writing in their name and making a fortune, you know, etc. If anyone ever wants to publish anything of mine posthumously, is that how you say that? There will be no problems because I have stacks of unpublished manuscripts, and one of them is called Unbecoming, and I'm going to read to you from it. I still have hopes of someday finding a publisher for it. It's set in Sterlingville. Sterlingville was a little burg that existed about 100 years ago, 20 miles south and 1 mile east of here. It was where the Monascon River, it was navigable to that point by some kind of a wheeling boat. What do they call those? Paddle wheel. There you go. And I'm very intrigued with the people who settled there. You could hardly tell there was even a town there at one time, but they had a school and a couple of churches and a dance hall. The dance hall is still there. And it's just like an old broken down barn. But anyway, so I want to read to you the first 5 manuscript pages, which is not as long as it sounds, and introduce you to a couple of the people in the novel. This first incident that is related in these pages actually happened to my husband's great-great uncle. His last name was O'Neill. It was a tragedy. There was no malice involved. However, as you know, a novel needs a villain. And the villain that shows up on the second page of these few pages is one of the favorite I've ever created. I love him to death. He's awful. And his Isaac Scott. And so here we go. An excerpt from Unbecoming, Sterlingville, Michigan, August 17th, the year of our Lord 1902. Hiram Scott tried to witch the sight, but his willow fork always led him to the river. So finally he chose a shallow seep and began to dig. With all the pure springs on that acreage, a family didn't need a deep well, just a stone-walled cistern to collect water, a place cold enough to store sweet cream and new churned butter. Hiram cut away a 5x5 square of field sod and then dug 7 feet down through hard red earth. When he finally reached a layer of pale gray pottery clay, he deemed his work worthy and rigged a rope and windlass to haul up the dirt. Hiram had dug other wells. He knew that when a man stands at the bottom of a shaft, some trickery of light dims the sky into dusk and spatters it with stars. He'd never heard anyone else mention such a thing, so it seemed as though he alone owned the secret. He climbed down into his well and smiled at those stars, night gifts in the broad light of day. When the seep began to flow at a good pace, Hiram decided he was done. He stood at the bottom of the hole, the muck gripping the soles of his boots, and looked up. To his surprise, a sudden eclipse narrowed the sky to a crescent, and the darkness scared him until he guessed the cause. He shouted his brother's name, raising the pitch of his voice so the sound would carry to the top edge of the earth. "Isaac? That you, Hiram?" Isaac called down. "What kind of fool did our mother raise? Why ain't you using curbs?" "I got me a ladder, and I got me a rope, and nothing's going to come down so fast that I can't bull my way out." Isaac grunted at him, and Hiram set his foot on the ladder's bottom rung. "I'm done," he said. "Just got a couple of bucketfuls to lift. I'll finish the rest tomorrow. I'm all played out." "There's half a day of light left," Isaac said. "You could put in the stone before dark." "I can't. I gotta get cleaned up. I promised Dean Chandler I'd ask for his granddaughter's hand today. They invited me to supper." Isaac, still looking down, jerked suddenly upright. "Thought I'd best beat you to it, brother," Hiram said, and he laughed. The laughter echoed from the top of the well, so Hiram heard it twice, once from his own throat, and again as though Isaac laughed with him. "Why?" Isaac asked. "Why what?" "Why you want to marry Rose Chandler?" Isaac spoke like a man caught near the brink of sleep, his words soft at all their edges. "Sometimes life narrows down on you, brother. My fault more than Rose's, so I promised I'd build her a house on my half of our farm. I thought this would be a good place so I won't be sitting right on top of you." Isaac cranked the handle of the windlass, then set the brake, and reached out over the hole for the bucket. He emptied it and sent it back down. "It's a long ways from the road," he commented. "We'll manage," said Hiram. The bucket dropped at Hiram's feet, and he dumped in a shovelful of mud, but as he scraped up another, the earth began to move. He set his knuckles against the sides of the well as if his arms alone could ward off calamity. When the first wall collapsed, it caught his ladder, a cobbled thing, dry and weak in its wood. The weight of the earth broke the center rungs and snapped one of the rails. Hiram gasped, ducked his head, and pressed himself against the steady side of the hole. "I need your help, Isaac!" he yelled. His brother dropped to his belly and looked down. Hiram could make out Isaac's red hair, the same color as Hiram's own. Once when Isaac was just a boy, he'd sopped his head with bootblack. But Hiram considered their red hair a birthright and believed that the earth itself had spawned the color, its red clay soil somehow marking both of them while they were still twined together in their mother's womb. "Hiram, you fool!" Isaac said. "Stand in the bucket and grab the rope. I'll crank you out." Hiram crammed his feet into the pail, the leather of his boots creaking. The rope jerked and grew taut. Trickles of seep water flowed from the mud, and falling dirt scalded his eyes. But as the bucket rose, Hiram began to breathe again. Then the windlass jerked and stopped, spun backwards, and dropped Hiram and the bucket into the sludge at the bottom of the well. "You knocked her up, didn't you?" Isaac called down to him. "What?" "Rose Chandler, she's carrying." "That ain't my worst problem at the moment, damn you!" Hiram shouted. "Pull me up!" The earth shuddered, and the other side of the well slewed in, burying Hiram to the level of his knees. "I'm thinking it's exactly your worst problem at the moment, brother," said Isaac, his words so quiet that Hiram could barely hear him. Hiram tried to shimmy up the rope, but mud poured in, steady and purposeful, until he was caught hard from the hips down. "Sorry, Hiram," Isaac called to his brother. "I gotta get another shovel since yours is at the bottom of the well and you only brung one. I'll be back." "For the love of God, Isaac, run!" Hiram screamed. No, brother, said Isaac. It's such a pretty day. Most likely, I'll just walk. In real life, Mr. O'Neill, my husband's uncle, did not survive. But when they dug him out, he had his hands on the rope and he was looking up. And to me, that is the perfect metaphor for the kind of person it took to settle the interior of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, to cut farms out of the wilderness, the faith, the courage, the guts to make it.
I'm going to use the mic. I have a question for you though. I was watching as you're reading and you have marked changes to it. And then also you were making changes as you read. Oh, is it a secret?
No.
And I was curious.
It's supposed to be so good the first time I write it that you don't have to do that.
So it's something that you're consistently always, even from right now when you were making changes from reading, are you going to make those changes you made?
Yeah.
Fascinating. Because one of them you had crossed out and then you added it back in when you was reading.
The rhythm was there.
Yeah, it was fascinating. As a writer, I was studying her going, interesting. Because you were making more dramatic choices, I felt, as you were reading too.
Yeah, that was my effort.
Yeah.
My husband over there can tell you, when I write, I talk out loud. So when he tried to get me into Dragon Speak, which is the program that writes it right down for you, oh man, it didn't work for me because I don't say the words the same for every character, and you know, it's dramatic.
It doesn't pick up dialect either.
It didn't then. It probably does by now, but it, you know, it was more correcting what I had written down. I have a vision problem, so that's why we're trying Dragon Speak. But maybe again someday we will. My method isn't good.
Julie, can you do me a favor? And I'm gonna grab one of those waters. Can you throw them down? And it'll look dramatic on the film if you throw it.
If it hits somebody, it'll be even better.
You don't want to do that.
I sort of bonded with Steve Hamilton. He was talking about how much he doesn't like to read. And the reason for Steve is, and it was interesting that he shared this, was that he has trouble making some sounds, he said. I don't know if I'm describing that exactly, but there's certain words he has trouble saying. And he gets really self-conscious when he's in front of people if he doesn't say the word right. And for me, at first I was like, I told Julie, don't tell people this because I just got diagnosed. And I was like, oh God, it's too embarrassing. But it's not like a big deal. It's just, the doctor said it was irritable larynx syndrome, where if I start reading, I'll start coughing. And so for years I've done this thing where I do readings, and by the end of the reading, I'm typically coughing a ton. And he said, don't read. And as a writer, I was like, oh, great. I'm allowed to read books to myself. just reading them out loud is a little more complicated. So, I don't know, Keith, if I start coughing or it hurts or something, is it okay? Can I pass it to you and just finish?
Absolutely.
Thank you, thanks a ton. I don't know what I'm reading yet. I'm supposed to have prepared that, but I'm a bad person. Let me think. All right, let's do this. This is, I was going to do poetry, but I don't know how to talk about poetry. I just write it. I don't know how to say intelligent things about it. So I'll try fiction. I think I can talk about this. This is chapter 4 from Now You Be. Okay, this is Craig talking. Here's the blah, blah, blah. I live in the UP. UP as in piss. Ishming, my hometown, begins with ish. It's like being from Yuckville. Hollow told me Ishming's Indian for heaven. If that's true, heaven sucks. There have been times our house was so covered with snow, I had to dig a tunnel for my dad to get to the mailbox. That don't happen in heaven. The only thing to do up here is get in trouble, or ice fish. It's like the houses are made out of boredom. My mom says it's peaceful, but death is peaceful. Which reminds me, I was born in Germany, lived in Colorado, downstate, and now here by Nagani. Hollow looked up Nagani in the dictionary, and it means nothing, because it's not in there. He said it would be between negativity and neglect. I grew up in Detroit, or as Anthony calls it, destroyed Michigan. We switched between Detroit and the UP, Ishpeming, Detroit, Detroit, Ishpeming. When the mines had layoffs, we moved to Detroit. When Detroit's auto factories had layoffs, we moved back to Ishpeming. If Michigan isn't building cars, it's digging up shit to make them. At one point, nobody anywhere was hiring, so we moved to Colorado, 1977. I don't remember anything about Colorado except hate. My mom says we're up here for good now. I'm not sure that for good is the right term. My voice is actually starting to go. Can you, I can feel it.
Okay.
Can you just start right there, between Ishpeming?
Between Ishpeming and Detroit, you'd think Ishpeming is safer. When I talked with this crew-cut cop, I said, must be nice being up here. He asked what I meant, and I said, in the UP, not all that crime. He said, you'd be surprised. He explained in Detroit you knew backup was minutes away, but here in the UP, on a call, you could have to go back in the redneck woods of Champion to some isolated deer camp, driving out on dirt roads with bumps deeper than Detroit potholes, skull-rattled bumps that knock mufflers off, and you'd realize if you needed backup, it'd take hours for them to get there, if they could find you at all. Plus all these people out in the woods, you know they have guns. They are northern hillbillies, ice-icks, snow Confederates. You can't afford heaters, so they light candles until their shacks smell like shrines and haul firewood until their backs cave in. But the fireplace doesn't heat all the way to the toilet, so every time they sit down, they get more and more ornery. And if it's an outhouse, I don't even want to talk about it. They definitely don't want some troll pig coming around messing with them. That's why they live above the bridge. The Mackinac Bridge separates the UP from Lower Michigan, so anyone that lives or lived below the bridge is a troll. And the only thing worse than a troll is a damn big cop troll. He said he felt safer in Detroit, the cop said. I never looked at my hometown the same way again.
God, can you just read for me forever? Oh my God.
Come up with the grant and help you.
Yeah. I wish I had your voice. I like your voice better than mine. Mine's messed up. Yeah, no, thank you for doing that. And now I gotta talk about it. When I was growing up, I didn't feel like, I don't know, maybe I can ask the audience this and this gives me a moment to not talk. Did you, when you guys were growing up, did you read a lot of UP literature or no? No?
No. No.
No? Anybody? Okay, you did? Actually, really?
Well, you know, comparison.
Well, there's
I wasn't growing up. I was already grown, I guess.
Yeah.
Hemingway.
Hemingway and Harrison, I don't know if that's really...
I know. Jane Johnston Schoolcraft?
Oh yeah,
That's
she's
recent,
awesome.
I wasn't a kid.
Yeah, just say that name everywhere we go. You should. She's incredible. I was like that where I didn't at all. I only had one class where we ever actually even looked at UP authors, and it was Finnish American history class at Northern. Beyond that, never. And so when I was writing it, I don't know. This is interesting too for Sue. Was that one of the reasons why you're writing about Alaska? But with Sue, did you want to write? That's set in the UP, right?
Yeah.
Were you wanting to? Was that like a goal of yours to try to create UP Lit?
I didn't think about it. I just, I was in the middle of my third Alaska book and I couldn't finish it. I couldn't figure out, I knew how about the end was, I couldn't get there from here. So I sat down one day and just wrote 5 chapters of this little book, just poured out of me. The kids were the same age as my kids in Sisu, and my husband picked it up and read it, and he said, and after that I could finish my book, you know, and my husband said, you've got to finish this because we can sell it. And he said, this needs to be published. You know, it was more the idea it needed to be published, not we can sell it. And so I finished it, and he sold it. I didn't even give it to my agent. I talked to her about it, and she said, I know that Doubleday will take it, but you know what? Really, or no, it was, by then it was William Morrow will take it. If you can find a small press that will publish it, it'll be in print a lot longer. And you know what? Of all of my 7 published books, Sisu's the only one still in print, and it's Thunder Bay Press out of Holt, Michigan. So if we had gone with you know, it would have had a 1-year life if we would have gone with William Morrow. So my husband made a deal, did the contract work, did everything, and I haven't even paid him yet his 15%. It was small press, you know, you don't make a lot, but it's been fun.
Yeah, but for me, I guess, just so I don't go long, because I could talk for hours about it, but what I wanted to do is I just wanted to write a book that was set in the UP, because I'd never read one. So when this was in 2000, that I just started writing it. And I also wanted to do it in a way that was a little bit different than, I don't know, I'd heard about books set in the UP, and I heard it was farting in saunas. That's what people would tell me, but I don't know if that's true, but that's what people would say, and I was like, well, I'm not going to have that as a book, so I wanted it to be a little bit more like if Quentin Tarantino was writing something set in the UP. I wanted it more, I don't know, like this contemporary feel. So I don't know if that was the reason for writing it. I just wanted to see, I wanted UP literature, and I think the book tour is an extension of that, trying to get UP writers out there.
We should talk about that anthology, you know.
Oh, and next year, April 2013, this is kind of exciting actually. Wayne State University Press is publishing the first ever anthology of UP writers. So I'm really excited about that. It has incredible submissions in it. Sue's in it, Keith's in it, Jennifer's in it, John Smolens, April Lindola, Steve Hamilton, Helen Airgood. I love 43 writers, 68 different pieces. I got a little something in it. It's I put a short story in there. The title is "We Tried to Sacrifice Ed to the Devil." It's a crazy story. So I got it. But the thing I'm excited about that is Wayne State said that they're going to do some serious publicity for it, and with the goal of helping to get UP writers' names out there, so that won't happen in our future for our kids and stuff like that. They'll grow up, and we can say, "Have you read UP literature?" And it'll be, "Of course I have." I really like that a lot. But thank you, Wayne State University Press, for doing that. And Michigan State University Press is also interested in another anthology all along those lines, so that's really, really nice. And this month, or next month, is it July right now? No, next month, Center for UP Studies is doing an anthology of plays, UP plays, first ever UP play anthology. That's called "Your Map is Wrong." A collection of plays set in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. So that's just an ebook though, but you can look for that. But it feels like a revolution of getting these names out there, because I really want people to know who Sue Harrison is. I'm kind of like on a mission to make sure that happens. I think as much as she's been working for literature up here, I think she needs to be known. And I'm talking about all writers as a whole up here, but Sue in particular, I mean, is somebody that I really like to back that up. And now somebody else who, I don't know, do you see yourself as a writer?
No.
But you were the Isle Royal.
Well, I'm going to talk about that. Yeah. I'm going to stand up to say, and I'm in Ron's UP anthology. It's only an inline poem though, but I'm a Canadian and I live in Ann Arbor. And what am I doing in this anthology of UP writing? Well, I don't know. I've been coming to the UP a long time. This is the third time I've been in this library in a year, and I see Ken likes it, which is good. Ken's not bored yet. That's a good thing. But I was thinking about how to vary things. I did this anthology of contemporary ghost stories from Michigan that Wayne State published last year, and I've been traveling around the state doing that, and the Library of Michigan sort of sent me around to a bunch of small town libraries. The first library I did was actually here. And then since then, I've done 27 more libraries, which is kind of amazing. And I'm really from Houghton to Adrian to, and my line is from Houghton to Adrian and the Sioux to New Buffalo. So I mean, I really crossed the state pushing this book. And I did push it here, so at least Ken and Susan heard me do this, although Susan did not turn the sound on the machine. So you can't hear that from
You're
January.
getting lots of grief about this.
But I did do it, so I didn't want to bore them. A few people heard me this afternoon, where I read mostly from a new little chapbook of poems, which of course I want everybody to buy. But I thought I might bore the 2 or 3 people who heard that. So then I was thinking that the woman who's doing the film for this series that Pam and Ron cut together was asking me about some time I spent in Isle Royal, and I did write about that. So I thought maybe I would just read tonight some Isle Royal poems. In 1991, the National Park Service started an artist in residence program on Isle Royal, and I was one of the first 3 appointees for that position. It was great. I think when they started that position, they really were thinking of painters and photographers, but they let some scribblers in now and then. Just they sort of condescend to let us in, and it's a great thing. They even let musicians in, lads. You should apply for that job. It's a great gig. They give you a little cabin out on the end of one of the tips of one of the peninsulas in Isle Royal, and you just sit there. Now I think it's 2 weeks. When I did it, it was 3. And I wrote constantly. Of course, there were no distractions other than Loon Song. And over the next few years, I went back and I took this journal. Some of the things turned into poems. Some of them I just left as little prose fragments. Put them together in a chapbook, and it was the fastest selling bit of poems I've ever done. People love their national parks. So people in Michigan and people in Minnesota bought all the copies of this small press limited edition chapbook in 3 months. It was like poof. I was like, wow, how cool was that? So when I was many years later, when I was putting together this book for Wayne State, this book of poems, which came out in 2009, I revisited those Isle Royal poems and published them as the last little section of this book, and then of course they put Isle Royal on the cover, which I was very pleased about. Lovely photograph by the late Ontonagon photographer Dan Urbanski, who was a fabulous photographer who lived over there in the Western UP. So my sequence of my poems was called Dream of the Black Wolf, Notes from Isle Royal. And of course you're there, you're thinking a lot. I hang out, for decades I've hung out with field biologists. I steal information because they're not going to write poems with all that stuff they know. So I steal from them. They don't seem to mind. So I spent a lot of time in Isle Royal with those great people, Rolf Peterson, who's actually just given up that study, but he did that wolf moose study on Isle Royal for years, which is one of the great ongoing natural history studies in the world. And he's been running that out of Michigan Tech. He took it over from someone else. So it's so I was thinking about wolves a lot, and I had dreams about wolves, which was a lot of fun. Although I never saw wolves, although as you will see, I did see their tracks. So this sequence starts with a little poem about a plant that I can't tell anybody about because it's rare, and I promised the person I wouldn't write a poem about it. So this is writing a poem about the poem I can't write. It's called Between Home and Isle Royal. The world is such that I can't say where exactly the place is, or some overzealous botanist might travel there to collect the last flower. And I can't even name it, although the name's a good one, worth remembering, because I promised a friend who took me there I wouldn't tell it. But I'll say it's by a lake, a big lake, and our country has many lakes, somewhere between home and Isle Royal. And it has a small flower, yellow, easily overlooked, growing from green clumps of leaves at the edge or even in the middle of cold streams, never warmer than 45 degrees, spring-fed streams that seldom freeze in winter, and small rooted strands break off from time to time, float downstream and start another clump, but not often because this plant grows in only 4 places on Earth, and we need special knowledge or friends to find it. Isle Royal, like many national parks, when it became a national park in 1935, they claimed all the land, and a lot of Isle Royal was, there were some businesses there, although nobody lived there year-round, fishing business and a couple of small mining businesses, and there were lots of people who had summer cabins there. They were given life leases, so as long as they were alive, or any of their children alive at that time, they could
keep their place on Isle Royal. I think we're down to 3 now. When I was there 21 years ago, there were 18. So I was staying in a cabin that had been built by a woman who was clearly a wonderful woman, although she was dead a long time ago. Her name was Elizabeth Kemmer, and she had this gorgeous cabin sort of a couple of bays away from Rock Harbor, very isolated. She was a school teacher in Wisconsin, never married, and spent her summers alone on Isle Royal, and that's where they put me. They don't put the artists there anymore, but they put me, and I loved it. So she was known as EK. So this is called the guest cabin for EK. Blue burns in a blue world. Wild iris, the blue flag uncurled in a basalt crack below spruce and beard moss. A greeting, if we want it, from the woman long dead who built her place where the wail and tremolo of loon song collect like the vespers chants of monks moving to prayer. At evening, the sun prisms through their windows, dappling the altar red and blue. I learned a word on Isle Royal that I'd never heard of, and people who know these things says, oh yeah, we all know that word, but the word seiche. You guys know this word, seiche?
I just learned it.
You do?
This past year.
It's a good word, and I'd never learned it. And you know, you people in watery country should know this word.
How do you spell it?
S-E-I-C-H-E. It's a German word. It's the phenomenon in bays and estuaries when the buildup in the big body of water is so great that it appears to send the water backwards up the streams. So it looks tidal, but it's not tidal. It happens much more quickly than tides. And I guess I kind of heard this, but I got caught in it in Isle Royal. Where I was paddling away and suddenly I was on mud, and I was like, what happened? How did that happen? And of course, that was where I happened to see the wolf prints. So, upstream on the Sainte. Carried upstream on the Sainte, water pushed back toward the source until the flow turns and my canoe stalls on mudbanks. Alder thickets, mosquitoes, and deer flies. Robins laugh from the shade. I can do nothing but slog back, pulling my boat through slime, slapping at bugs. Then, high in the mud, tracks. I climb up, kneel before them, and sketch one in my notebook to compare with a guide at home. 2 3/4 wide, 3 3/4 long, angular toes, the center 2 noticeably larger than the 2 outside. The track of a small wolf, its outline clear, the edges sharp, until the Sainte returns and fills the creek, releasing my canoe. Water rises to wolf print, dissolving it, dirt stirred up, then back toward the big lake. A gentle pull, but strong enough to carry me out past mudbanks, the sedge and rushes, jewelweed glowing orange, oxeye daisies, out past the thickets, shaded at midday, creatures hiding inside. I just want to read you the poem about the dream, since I didn't see the wolf, but Ron's voice thing is catchy. I never lose my voice. You sit next to Ron Reikki, it's gone.
But while you're drinking, could you send me that for the Michigan State anthology, that Isle Royal poem?
Sure. Let's talk about it. Absolutely. So these guys, we have to get permission from these guys, but they give it to us. Yeah. So here's a poem about the dream, and it's one of those poems that look weird and goes all over the page, you know. But I'm trying to do that because I'm trying to catch the sort of broken nature of the dream. I try, perhaps foolishly, to catch that when I read it, although I probably haven't read this poem out loud in 10 years, but see how it goes. Dream of the Black Wolf. A quick glimpse in my eyes corner, black wolf running, always running, ears back, fur shaggy, hackles up, a touch of white or silver on its belly beside the lake, over rock, and lost between spruce and cedar before I turned. And then the last little prose, I didn't give you any of the prose fragments, but the last little prose fragment that sequence ends on. The last morning just before dawn, while I was packing the canoe, a cow moose waded out into the little bay behind the cabin. She walked out as far as she could, then took off swimming. The sun broke over the trees on the opposite side of Tobin Harbor, and the moose was lost in the glare of sun on water.
I would like to be cold and clear-headed about these events, but it is hard not to take them as signs. So that's Isle Royale. So, you know, I mean, that's inspired by the UP, or does Isle Royale count as the UP? I know it's in Keweenaw County.
Yeah.
I know it's in, but it is out there in the middle of Lake Superior, after all. So Isle Royale was essential to that. And Isle Royale was, I'd already been coming to the UP before that time, but that sort of cemented my relationship with the UP, and I've been coming back pretty regularly since then. Although I don't get to Isle Royale nearly as much as I'd like to, but it gets harder as you get older and your knees get sore, you know. You got to work to explore that place.
Well, let's give everybody a round of applause, please. Would it be okay if we took like a short break before we start Q&A? Is that okay, Susan?
Absolutely.
Just about 2 or 3 minutes. Maybe
Eat those good
5
sweet
minutes, and then we
things.
can. How about
Otherwise,
we
Ken's going to eat them all.
It's really bad.
We come back about 10 after and then start the Q&A, and then we can go into the book signing. Okay?
5 books.